Welcome to the 99, where we are focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I am your host, Patrick Marlatt.
And I'm Justin Rodriguez, and today we talk all things Neheb.
That's right, the Dreadhorde champion. I've been brewing for this boy as soon as we did that set review, since I realized that there is great potential here. Someone who loots through your deck and gets you mana, that's what we love.
We played a lot of games with this, and there are a lot of cards that should not go in the list.
Yes, and a lot of cards that definitely should. And today we want to answer the question, ultimately, is Neheb Dreadhorde champion cEDH worthy? So without spoiling that, why don't we talk about some of our inclusions, what we find essential for this deck. Before we begin the video, I do want to discuss one alternative win condition that I hinted on in at least my primer. I know our first video, we discussed Breath of Fury and Kiki-Jiki as an alternative combat.
We tried it.
Combo.
We tried it a lot.
Fine, but it doesn't go off often enough, and it's hard to set up. So we've switched plans here. Obviously, Aggravated Assault is the core strategy for infinite combat. You don't even need to go infinite. We'll talk about that later. However, we switched Kiki-Jiki out for Dual Caster Mage, Twin Flame, and Heat Shimmer.
So much better.
Infinitely better. Infinite Dual Caster Mage is better. So the thing with Dual Caster Mage, and we'll have the cards up on the screen for you, is that when he enters the battlefield, he has Flash. You can copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new copies for that target. So if, this is an old trick, but if you don't know it, Twin Flame and Heat Shimmer copy target creatures. One copy is any creature, one copy is only creatures you control, that being Twin Flame. So essentially, you'll copy the creature. Again, you need to have at least one creature on field for either of these. And then you'll re-target Dual Caster Mage when he ETBs.
So you hold priority, you play Dual Caster Mage?
Correct. So you'll say Twin Flame, my Neheb. Doesn't matter at this point. And then we cast Dual Caster Mage on top of that.
This sounds like Narmea.
It does sound a little bit like Narmea. So they're going to come in and they're going to have haste. That's the most important part. And what's nice about this is it only has a prerequisite of 5 mana. And there are cards that I consider must-includes that will allow you to recur either Heat Shimmer or Twin Flame. And we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
But it's far more resilient combo. And these cards have benefit outside of their own loops.
Yeah, tell me that. Like, why? So if we're not looping with Dual Caster Mage, does Dual Caster Mage have any...
Oh yeah, I mean, it's excellent. If I just need to find Aggravated Assault and you cast Demonic Tutor, give me Demonic Tutor. Like, we don't have any form of tutor in this deck, and that's, generally speaking, what we're going to be using our Reverberate and Fork for anyways. Like, I want to add Nas.
Just still tutor,
like,
sure.
Exactly. Sure. It could do the simplest thing, or it could do something devastating. All that matters is we get to copy someone else's magic.
What's your average CMC?
The average CMC for this deck, I think it's like 2.4, and the
Okay,
deck
so your
list
Nas won't be too bad.
No, and
You'll draw a couple cards.
the list is I have my laptop off to the side.
On your turn with Neheb.
Yeah,
Which would be great.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a big wheel.
Bottom line is, this is definitely a more resilient combo to have baked into the deck over Kiki-Jiki, and it has far more utilities outside of its own combo. So bear that in mind. I do mention that on the primer. The primer is going to be reshaped in just a few, but that's what I'm currently running with. If you look at the list, of course, there's a link in the description here. You'll notice that Dual Caster Mage is in and Kiki is out. So far as notable inclusions are concerned, well, I've got a fat handful of cards here. Of course, you're going to see them up on the screen. Library of Lang.
The best auto-include into any Neheb list. This is fantastic. You're telling me that for 1 mana, I can have an artifact. I skip my discard phase.
So you have no maximum hand size.
That's fine. But whenever I discard a card, I can instead put it on top of my deck. So all these cards that I want to keep anyway, when I get to activate Neheb, I can get mana off of them by discarding them, but I don't get rid of them.
Exactly.
They go right on top of my deck, and then I draw cards with Neheb's ability. It's very good. Yeah. It's very good. And it's only 1 mana.
It's only 1 mana, so it's obviously going to be your turn 1 play, and even later, if you have extra combat phase, and this happens to be something you pull into, I highly recommend that if you use your Seize the Day, whatever it is, that if you have the spare mana, play Library of Lang. It's going to save your ass moving forward. Trust me, it is an auto-include in this deck, particularly when you have like a double strike effect on your Neheb. You're going to go through so much of your deck, and you gain so much mana in doing so.
I think the most important thing with Neheb is having a flush hand size when you get to activate him. And Library of Lang literally says it's okay if you like your cards because you still get to keep them.
Correct.
But I'm going to give you mana off of them when you discard them.
Yeah, it's the perfect synergy with this deck. This should not be on your sideboard. It should be main boarded.
Yes.
This is a auto-include for Neheb. Now, I've seen a lot of stacks builds floating around. I think Neheb stacks is viable. I think it's a strategy. It's not our core goal to be a tempo player to slow down other decks in that sense. But there are 2 auto-includes in my book that should go in any mono-red deck.
Yeah.
But these are going to cut down on our opponent's multicolored decks functioning as highly as they should. And that is Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon. They both do the same thing, if you don't know what they are. Basically, non-basic lands are mountains now. Everyone's symmetrical.
Fantastic.
3 CMC each. They're both one's 2 generic, 1 red, and as a creature, human wizard. The other one's an enchantment.
Out of all the stacks options, I think these are the best.
Yes.
They really are.
Yeah. And they're auto-includes for me because we don't have many effects in this deck that cause our opponents to have to commit to removing them. And we are allowing ourselves to get ahead in the game by denying them of their own resources and denying them of, if someone has to use something to destroy Blood Moon as an enchantment, that's one less card we're going to see going against our aggravated assault. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to synergize with the deck to be a viable option. I think if we're just cutting down our opponent's resources and furthering our games, we don't care if we have mountains.
How many non-basics do you run?
In this deck, it's crazy. If you look at the list, there are 28 lands. There are only 10 basics. The thing is, our utility lands, they're going to come back. People are going to destroy Magus of the Moon. And
we're okay with them being mountains.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
that's totally fine. Like, if I had a turn 1 mountain and I was able to play a City of Traders, I would turn 2 Blood Moon. Sure. And just say, go for it. Go for it. Now, I've got 2 mountains. I can play, and that's the thing, we do need an effective amount of red in the deck as well, so sometimes this can actually just help us power out our Neheb, because he does require 2 red to play. But to me, these are auto-includes in many mono-red decks, and it's definitely an auto-include here.
Yes.
This is an interesting one. It's from the Ixalan block, and it's Direfleet Daredevil. A lot of folks have been incorporating this in many red builds. It's 1 generic and 1 red, creature, human, pirate, first strike. Basically, when you play her, she enters the battlefield, exiles a target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast that card this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana type to cast that spell.
What do we want?
If it gets put back in the graveyard, you exile it. So that's important to note. You're denying someone of something that's potentially great for them. But what do we want? Generally speaking, on a combo turn, if we think that we can manipulate our deck in such a way to win on that turn, guess what? We can Direfleet Daredevil again in much the same fashion. Someone's tutor, find our aggravated assault. It's only 3 to place on the field. Remember, aggravated assault's 2 generic and 1 red. It costs 2.
So 5 mana.
So 5 mana total.
Okay.
And then if you have the 5 prerequisite in hand and Neheb out, you can begin your combo right there.
Yeah, because you could just attack, dump all the cards, get 5 mana,
do it
pay
again.
for it again, and keep going.
And note, I'll mention this a little bit later, but it's important to keep your hand flush even if you have aggravated assault out, because you could be working on one player and another one of the 2 players will be ignoring you. They're like, well, I don't have to deal with them yet. The best way to go about knocking out players is to, if you see the wheel, play the wheel and then get a flush hand moving forward, have a hand of 7 instead. Always try to keep your hand healthy. So even if you do have the 5 minimum, that's not safe. Regardless, Direfleet Daredevil, in my opinion, is an auto-include here and should be in most red decks, in my opinion, because there are a lot of effects that red is simply missing or just deprived of.
Most notably tutors.
Other than Gamble and Imperial Recruiter, and at least in my list, you need this. This is going to save your hide. Trust me.
It's play tested really well.
Oh my gosh. It's an amazing card. It saved me in Godo. It's an excellent utility in any mono red deck. So this is one that I recommended when my primer initially went out, and it was scoffed at. No, I think a lot of people were just confused with this inclusion, and I can see where it looks like it's a dangerous card to have on your side of the field because it can exchange hands, but this is a must include for Neheb.
Coveted Jewel that actually play tested well, and I really didn't think so. I thought this was trash.
You want to read it off?
Yeah, I mean, it's 6 mana. It's an artifact, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards, and it taps for 3 mana of any color. So, essentially, if you have 6 mana, and you get to play it, you get 3 mana back because it's going to tap for 3.
And you get to see 3 new cards.
And it's a 3 mana draw 3. Pretty good. It's pretty good. Didn't think it was viable, but when you're going through wheels, and you're going through your deck, and you need to keep going...
And you need that extra combat.
This was very useful.
Yeah, because duly note that our extra combats aren't that expensive. I mean, Fury of the Horde is 7. You're typically going to exile cards to do that and hopefully have a wheel to get back a flush hand before you attack. The draw 3, so it replaces itself and you get to see 2 new cards, but you're also giving yourself a flush hand. So if you've already played the multiple, an extra combat, you get, instead of having 5 cards, you have 7 cards now. It's really good, and it'll let you ramp and give you mana of any one color for whatever your next hand of 7 is.
This is like one of those cards that you just look at and you're like, why is this in the list?
It's
and then
odd.
you play test it and you're like, wait a second, this is actually pretty good. And
Yeah.
I can't really understand why it's pretty good and why I still like it.
Yeah.
We're going to still test it. We're still going to still play with it. I mean, I've gotten good results with it.
I love it. I think at 6 CMC it may seem high, but to me it is a must include in the deck. I've seen people run the Jaya Ballard instead, right? But to me, she'll let you ramp into an instant or sorcery, or she'll let you loot 3 or draw 3. I forget. It's not as effective in my book. I've tested that. I'll put the Planeswalker up so we know what we're talking about, but it's not as good as Coveted Jewel. I would highly recommend if you use that Planeswalker, switch it out for this. It is far better, and it's actually a really cheap card to pick up too. All right, so unfortunately, we don't get much by way of recursion in this deck, and I use Shreds of Sanity. I think that's great to be able to recast cards. However, Recoup is an effect that I find is absolutely essential for this deck.
Yeah, we like it because it has flashback.
We like it because it has flashback. Secondly, it's only 1 generic and 1 red to cast the first time. And basically, target sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback. Its flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. That's beautiful. So if you have an extra combat in your grave, like Relentless Assault, I get to do that again on this turn. And it only costs 2 to activate that ability. It is a little mana intensive, but mid to late game, which is typically how Neheb is going to roll out and win, this is a very viable option. It's just excellent to have flashback on any one card, and it doesn't even need to be an extra combat, but typically speaking, it's either that or a wheel. Because imagine giving yourself Wheel of Fortune again.
After playing Niv and understanding why regrowth effects are so good, I've understood that Recoup is actually very viable in this deck because you're looting and you're getting rid of so many cards, and you get to see so many cards in your graveyard.
Exactly.
And giving those cards flashback.
Yeah, because you don't always have Library of Lang, so you're not always going to get the card back on your deck.
Yeah.
So you can safely throw it in your graveyard, and that's the thing. Most high-functioning cEDH decks are only operating off of 20, 25 cards anyways. This lets you get one of those cards back. I think it's really great. And one noteworthy combination is Recoup with Wheel of Fate. Wheel of Fate is a sorcery that costs this much. We can recast Wheel of Fate for nothing. So it's basically, like, this is basically the cheapest Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest Wheel of Fortune. I really like it in the deck. I think it's an auto-include if you're looking for that flashback utility.
Another fantastic card is Past in Flames for 3 and a red sorcery. Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until the end of the turn. And that cost is equal to its mana cost. And it has flashback itself.
Yeah, speaking of flashback, this is like the queen of all flashback cards. It works best if your graveyard is flush with your rituals, your Rite of Flame, your I forget what they're all called, but we have so many rituals in the deck, like Seething Song, stuff like that. You're gonna use Past in Flame, and you've run out of whatever mana you had left, and then whatever you have in your pool, just play all of those rituals again, and you have a flush amount of red mana, then recast the spell.
I think the biggest problem with Neheb is, like, you would kill one player and then you'd be like, how do we keep going? And Past in Flames is a card that lets you keep going because you get that mana, you've stockpiled all this mana, you no longer have an extra combat. You're screwed. You're like, okay, I have like 20 mana, what do I do now? I have 2 more players to kill. Past in Flames lets you keep going.
Exactly. And that's all
which is so
really
essential.
needs.
Which is so essential.
And there's some cards that you'll notice that are in the deck, like Reckless Charge, effects that give us the plus power option to command damage someone out. So we only have to do 3 attacks to technically knock out one of our opponents.
Instead of 5.
Exactly. So this is going to allow us to maybe recur one of those effects so that we can efficiently knock our opponents out, because it's difficult because we only have so many extra combats in the deck, and there's only 2 extra turns now. So we do want to keep the ball rolling. Past in Flames is one of the best ways to do that, and there's one more card that does it just as effectively, in my opinion. And that card is Finale of Promise.
Again, new card that came out with War.
Yeah, and you know what? I honestly don't think we thought much of it then, but in this deck, it has become an essential, and this is a must include in my opinion, over Mizzix's Mastery. You might see that in a few lists. I've actually removed that, and I'll talk to you about why I've removed that. And I'd say that it's an exclude for me. You can probably avoid that in most lists. In most instances, it's just an overcost recoup. Overcost. Well,
I was always just pitching it. I was looting it away. I didn't like it. It wasn't useful.
However, this, on the other hand, Finale of Promise, if you don't know, we've talked about it a lot on the show. It's X and 2 red. and you can cast up to one target instant and or up to one target sorcery card from your graveyard, each with a converted mana cost of X or less without paying its cost. So, and you can obviously duplicate that effect if X is 10 or over.
What do we
don't really want to do that.
We're trying to get wheels.
A wheel,
Yeah.
extra combat.
And an extra combat.
Instant-wise, we can get something to burn our opponents. We can get something that's going to give us additional mana to play on something in our hand.
Have you ever gotten over 10? Or 10
I haven't.
Or more?
I have just goldfishing, not in an actual game. However, over 10 is an essential, and I'll tell you why. Most of our extra combat state, untap all creatures. There's additional combat after this combat phase, followed by an additional post-combat main phase. You only get the untap once. There's no delayed trigger there. You untap the one time.
So you untap, you have an extra combat, and then you attack. You still have an extra combat, but you don't get the second untap.
Yeah. Unless you have some effects that make your creatures vigilant, which is something that you might want to bear in mind if you use Mizzix's Mastery. But Mizzix's Mastery, you blow your load on that. You go and use its overload. You copy and exile all of your extra combats from your graveyard. You don't get to see them again. But you only get you only get those untaps the one time. So sure, you can have as many extra combats as you want.
Yeah, but if you have no way to untap Neheb, there's really no point.
No.
So you never try to...
Not really.
To get that, okay.
No, you don't want to No,
you never shoot for that 10.
I'd say overload it. You don't want to get over 10.
Okay.
Not really. So essentially, you just have a very cost-effective means of replaying cards from your graveyard, which is phenomenal. So to me, this is a must-include. Certainly something I'll encourage you all to consider if you're building your own list, or if it isn't in your list. Definitely check out Finale of Promise.
What is the... the archive. Okay.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So what do you want to start with? There's a lot of cards that I think have been suggested floating around there, out in other decks, that I think are not as efficient as people would like them to be, and certainly not auto-includes for this deck.
I really wanted Alhammarat's Archive to be good. I really did. It's 5 mana, and if you would gain life, you gain 12. That's not important. Okay. It's if you would draw a card, except the first one, you draw 2 cards. So you get to draw a lot of cards with Neheb. And I thought this might be good, because essentially we want to wheel as hard as we can. We want to see as many cards as we can. We want to dump as many cards as we can for mana. But when do you play this card? That's the trick. That's
the question I'd ask myself as soon as it was suggested, as soon as I saw it. And then, when I was researching the deck, I saw the archive. I saw that it had potential in the deck. And then I decided to go with Coveted Jewel instead. Because there's no moment where you will cast this and be able to attack again. I'd love to see that happen. Because most of the times, you're going to wheel into it, because it's not something you want to start with either.
You're going to discard like 5-6 cards. You're going to get 5 or 6 mana, draw 5 or 6 cards. You're going to have the archive. You're going to play the archive, but that's it. That's your turn.
Well, I mean, imagine you get your Neheb out turn 2, turn 3.
Sure.
Let's just say turn 4, the latest, and you have 5 cards in hand, and you have the mana prerequisite to, cast a ritual, play the archive, and you've got like 1 land floating. And then you can get an attack off with 4 cards in hand. That's like a very dream scenario. You want to cast this before you attack the first time each turn. You're going to do this pre-combat.
Yes.
Always try to do it pre-combat. But if you're trying to do it while you're running a loop or running extra combats, then you're not going to have the mana for it.
It's just discard fodder. So knowing that it's half the time it's going to be discard fodder, would you even run it?
No.
That's the thing. No, you wouldn't.
Because it has no value outside of you attacking, and you aren't allotted the opportunity to cast it very often before you attack, because you're going to have to waste a lot of resources to do that. Let's just say let's say I get my Neheb out on turn 2, and I did it with a Servant, Generator, and then my lands.
Sure.
We want to keep our hand flush, but I want to get the Archive out. So I play my Mana Crypt, I play my land for that turn 3. I've got 3 lands, Mana Crypt, and I've got maybe 3 or 4 cards left in my hand.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's viable, but even still, those scenarios have never jumped out or happened in actuality.
So typically you want to like race out the archive, but you're more focused on racing out Neheb, so it's
weird.
It's in this weird limbo zone of I want the archive out first, but I want Neheb out first. What do I do?
Where they fall on curve is very similar to each other, but also it's just a bad card to loot into when you're running Neheb. Because if it's the difference of, like, I attack, I drop 5, I draw 5, I have 5 mana left, I have my I have my Savage Beating now, which I can play before combat ends, And then I have Archive, and I'm like, well, I can hold for Archive and wait till next turn.
But it's so
and
good
cross
when
my
you get
fingers.
it. When you get it, it's so good.
It's really good.
It's so
I think
good.
there's an argument for it, but not in my particular build. I think if you're running a slower list, maybe one of those stacks lists, you're probably going to want the Archive.
Yeah.
However, we're trying to go now. It's not going to happen very effectively in this list. Again, a lot of the scenarios we talked about, they don't happen in actuality often.
This is like more of like a second loop card. It's like you now have like 10 mana, and you can now play the Archive, and now you can play your extra turn or your extra combat. Then it's like, okay, this might be viable.
Maybe.
Have you ever gone it second loop?
No, I mean the best way to allow for that to happen is maybe a double strike option. Like you do Assault Strobe, and then you go through a bunch of cards, and you have like 8 to 9 mana left over, and then what? You can Seize the Day and Archive, right? That would be good.
That is excellent. Yeah.
That is excellent. But again, that never happened for me. That never happened in testing. So it's usually a do nothing card. You just cast it and wait. You don't want to do that.
Speaking of do nothing cards, what do you think of Squee?
Oh my gosh. So Squee the Goblin Nabob. This is a card that people like for obvious reasons. When you are attacking, you want as many cards in hand.
Sure.
Guess what? At the beginning of your upkeep, if Squee's in your graveyard or whatever, you put him back in your hand. He's on the screen now. It's slow. It's really slow.
It's slow because when we attack, we really want to end it as soon as possible. It's not like we're going to get recurable value off of this. This is like, yes, we get to discard it. We get an extra card.
Yeah.
Next turn, we get to do it again, but we're not really trying to go next turn. We're not trying to go turn.
No.
So, I mean, the most we'll get off of it is maybe 2 discards.
And our opponents won't be allowing that. So imagine that you do the Neheb thing, you do the Squee thing at least once.
Yeah.
Someone's going to remove Neheb. You're not going to have Neheb again. And then you get Squee back in your hand. He is largely a do-nothing outside of that one synergy.
It takes up a deck slot, and it doesn't offer enough.
No. To me, I would rather add Tamir Battle Rage. Because let's just say that, okay, I got one less card to discard, I get one less mana from that card, I get one less draw from that card. Well, then why don't I just play Tamir Battle Rage? It's instant speed.
Double strike effects in general are amazing.
I get double strike. Exactly. In that instance, I would just highly recommend using a looting effect, using a double strike effect, but specifically double strike. There aren't enough cards that offer double strike that are good in this deck. And the next one I want to talk about...
It's like 2.
And at this point, unfortunately, the next one I want to talk about is Blood Mist.
Okay. Blood Mist. Overcosted.
It's 3 CMC and 1 red, and basically you get to choose a creature every attack phase to gain double strike.
Amazing if we can get it off.
Enchantment.
Amazing if we can get it off. I mean, just seeing more cards is fantastic in the head, but...
It suffers that same Almaret Archive problem as to when do you cast Blood Mist.
Yeah.
Because it's taking up the same slot you want to be casting Neheb in. When do you cast Blood Mist? You want those one-shots. And unfortunately, there aren't enough one-shot double strikes, so I can see why people are using this. And I think the stacks lists that are coming out, they're being baked up. They're being brewed because there is a lack of utilities in Neheb right now, and the best ones we can get are things like Blood Mist, things like Archive. It's too slow. And again, at least the way our list operates, it wants to go fast. And Blood Mist doesn't allow for that. Not at all.
Agreed.
It's excellent, but it's slow. And lastly, another card that I would tell you to exclude, unless your list allows for it, is Fire Shrieker.
We tried it. 3 mana for an equipped, 2 to equipped. We now have double strike. What do you think?
It's the same problem Blood Mist and Archive have.
Yeah.
Too slow. It's too slow. And honestly, we run Mask of Memory. I think that's an excellent loot effect. And even I would consider the Rogue's Gloves before this. Maybe.
Would you?
They're both bad. The Rogue's Gloves are a slower form of Mask of Memory, but Mask of Memory is 2 CMC, 1 to equip, and whenever your creature does damage or attacks, it gets to draw 2 cards, you discard 1. So it's a loot effect on a creature when he's attacking, and it's very cheap to do. That's good. I think that's fine.
What I like about Fire Shrieker is if we're forced to go into additional turns, like we have to pass our turn, then we still have that double strike effect, which is nice. It is. And if we're really hurting for more double strike effects, this is probably one of the best ones to include that we're not running.
Yeah. Over Blood Mist in your opinion?
Blood Mist, I would rather run this because we can at least throw this on the field.
So you could Blood Mist too.
You could too. Yeah, that's true.
And I don't understand why folks would run that over Blood Mist. It's just like maybe those lists are running Godo and they think they can just grab the equipment and put it on the field. So at least that's why it's tutorable. It's, in my opinion, not an effective double strike. And one of the things we're going to talk about when discussing whether this deck is cEDH viable is the effects. There's a lack of redundancy and useful effects that help Neheb. And I think there's a lack of decent redundancy so far as double strike is concerned in this deck. And you'll notice we only have 2 double strike effects in the deck. Those are the best ones, in my opinion. They're recurable with our cards.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like Assault Strobe, which we'll talk about
the
in a few.
The cheapest one-shots are great.
Exactly.
Because at least when we get extra combats on that same turn, they're still...
We just use less of our resources to make those things possible.
Yeah, we have double strike for that entire turn.
So Fire Shrieker, in my opinion, I would exclude unless your list allows for it. I think that's more of a grindy stacks, slower build. Like you might use Fire Shrieker there, and particularly if you have Godo, maybe you want to run those. If you're going outside the Helm combo, exactly. It's like if you're trying to go outside the Helm combo, maybe you'll use that. But even still, it's not good. I think between Mask of Memory, Rogue's Gloves, and the Fire Shrieker, Shrieker Gloves.
Okay.
All right, so ultimately, we want to answer the question, is this deck cEDH viable? Again, I've been brewing this for
a while.
Too long now, and I've been looking over the list, tweaking it, trying to refine it, trying to get you guys the best list. Particularly from the comments, what you guys have suggested over on Reddit. We want to fine-tune this to see if it can compete with the Food Shade Mystics of the world, with the Savalas, with the Zers. And truth be told, it can hold its own, but as it stands now, it's not consistent enough to be a top-tier competitor, in my opinion. And
you can kill a person. You can kill a player.
You can kill 2 players, maybe.
You can kill 2 players, maybe, but you really need to kill all 3. And it's very hard to keep going in this deck. And unfortunately, we need to run every wheel we can get our hands on.
Yeah.
We need to run all the 5 cost wheels.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But we need to see more cards. We need to discard more cards. If we don't have a flush hand, we have 28 lands. That's crazy.
Yeah.
We're very like low to the ground, go.
Yeah.
And it's the problem with Neheb is like you constantly have to wonder. It's like, do I need this land or would I rather have it in my hand because I'm going to get mana anyway from it? So it's a fun interactive puzzle, and that's why we enjoy this deck.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's ready yet.
I think where our list currently is, I'll say it, I think it's as good as it can get with the current strategy that this deck employs. It's as good as it can get. There are instances where a dual caster mage strategy is better than your Neheb strategy, and you should aim for that.
Of course.
But the effects we're looking to get more of are things like double strike. All we have now is Tamir Battle Rage and Assault Strobe. Those aren't enough. They're 1 CMC, 2 CMC. I have them on the screen now, but we want more double strike effects like that to go through our deck. We want better looting effects. Folks are using Wild Guess. Folks are using Tormenting Voice. Those aren't very great loot effects. The only ones I would consider running are Cathartic Reunion and Faithless Looting. Band of, as Justin said, we want every form of wheel in the deck. And things like Wheel of Fate actually work.
Yeah.
Wheel of Fortune work. Winds of Change. Unfortunately, you have to include it. Korvat's Fury, in my opinion, it replaces itself. It deals damage to our opponents. We want that. Unless we know they've tutored for something they need, then you discard that. Reforge the Soul, you're never going to get that miracle unless you're really lucky. Seriously. Memory Jar, Runehorn Hellkite, Nullspine Dragon, we use all of those because they make our hands flush, and we need a flush hand.
Because we race out Neheb, that's great. But if you have no hand to work with... Really unfortunate. And
unfortunately, we don't have enough extra combats, in my opinion. And just to list them off, we've got 2 extra turn cards now. Aggravated Assault, obviously. Seize the Day. Relentless Assault. Savage Beating, which I don't even really like. World at War. And Fury of the Horde.
I mean, we need the extra combats. We have to keep going.
Yeah. Those are the core effects to the deck. And how many did I list off there? There aren't that many to maneuver with. Certainly not enough for you to statistically always be pulling into it when you try to go off with the Neheb. A lot of times you will whiff. So
a lot of the time.
So you can expect to need to play your Blood Moon instead and wait. And or just keep your defenses up to get going on the next turn. And again, that's not really optimal for what the deck wants to do, but sometimes that's what you have to do.
Agreed. So I know we discussed this before, but what did you think of like a Godo shell inside of Neheb?
And I'd love to see or hear from you guys brewing the Godo shell list. I know it's something I've considered because Neheb does have insane value in the command zone. bar none. He's one of the best mono red commanders, just for effect.
One of two.
One of two, because he allows you to loot, and it's card filtering. It's not necessarily card draw. It's filtering. But when you filter, you get mana. So you get a mana advantage. And what do people look for in cEDH? Ramp, effective ramp, and card draw.
Of course.
We get both of those in one card. So does he work as an effective commander for a deck that's trying to utilize Godo in the shell? I don't think so.
What about land destruction?
I think it's an empty husk of a tactic. And I think with mass land destruction, I run a mass land destruction Godo build. I certainly think it's more effective and more consistent than this Neheb. However, we are trying to put Neheb out with as few resources as possible. That's why we only have 28 lands, and we have all forms of ramp in our deck. So far as fast mana, hell, we even use Spawning Breath to deny our opponents and gives ourselves just one more mana. We only need so much to get Neheb out, and then we want to keep him there. Unfortunately, there's not much for us to do that. So mass land destruction, it might be stubbing our own toe if we go that route. Because again, we're not really playing that many lands when we go off. We have maybe 2 lands at most on deck.
Sure.
Heck, we even run Ghost Town to give ourselves another card to discard. And that's a must include.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Ghost
Town? Talk about Ghost Town.
I'll leave it on the screen. There's a must include I forgot to talk about.
Such a weird one.
Mono red. It adds generic mana. You can pay 0 to put it back in your hand at any of your opponent's turns.
Okay, so
that's better than Squee. I choose when. If I need mana now, I get mana now. If I don't need mana now, I get a card to discard. Petrified Field, same thing.
Yeah.
So we don't use mass land destruction cards here, but I think there could be an excellent sub-strategy for it. I think I've seen lists that run your Epicenter, that run your Impending Disaster. Those are just mass land destruction cards. I think MLD could be a thing with Neheb, but it's certainly not a strategy I'm trying to employ. And so far as Godo is concerned, in the 99, there's nothing you can do to tutor him other than gamble. So how effectively are you getting Godo out and winning? Because the prerequisite is still going to be 11 mana, unless you go with the Dreadhorde, you go with the Goblin.
You go with that extra turn.
Yeah, you go with the extra turn. Maybe. But you're asking for a lot to be in your hand, so I think you are much better off just playing Godo. Like, if you want to play Godo and you want to do that artifact route, just play Godo.
Oh, it's such a compact combo, but it's so mana intensive and it's so inconsistent.
Well, that's why people do the trash for treasure thing. They're like, well, you're
Soul
Ring.
We only have one tutor.
Yeah.
I know, I wish.
But Godo at least is his own tutor. And the thing is, if you do the Helm of the Host trick, you can also use it on Combat Sovereign, so there's call for him to be back in the deck.
Okay.
But I think as it stands with the list I'm running and the strategy, the route I'm trying to take, I think this is the most fast, effective means of getting a potential Neheb win. However, it is lacking the redundancies we want. There aren't enough extra combats, affordable extra combats. There aren't enough double strike effects. And that's why we have to use things like Mask of Memory. I would much prefer another double strike effect.
I would too. I don't know if Modern Horizons would bring us that.
And we'll see.
Great.
But as of yet, I would say this is like a 1.5 commander. If you're trying to take this to a tournament, you'll have a fun time with it.
You'll definitely have a fun time.
Yeah, and you do insane things on your turn.
We've had great times with this. Winning, though?
It has. We've won a couple times. But the thing is...
You got really lucky.
You got to. And that's... I just want to state, I know this is a competitive channel and we want to run competitive decks, but luck is 50% of this game. And redundancies help you mitigate that, but luck is 50% of this game, and you really feel it with Neheb. The luck aspect of Magic top decking, it's just a factor of this game that you feel it's more prevalent than ever here than it is in any other deck, because we don't get to utilize our tutors to effectively win us the game aside from gamble. But even then... It gambles in the name.
You're really reliant on your wheels.
Yeah.
That your wheels are good.
That your wheels are effective.
Because if you draw into a bunch of useless stuff, you better hope you have a second combat.
Or, your library of Lang is out, but we don't even have a way to get that, Like if you wanted to wheel, but you have the thing you need in your hand, but you need the 7 cards.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, that's when you have 3 cards, aggravated assault's one of them, and then you wheel, put that back on top. Your library was your library of Lang.
Yeah.
Again, there's another reason you include it. But I think as it stands, the deck is where it needs to be. I think I'm looking for further sets to better this deck. But I'll tell you what, this is the red deck I'm going to keep to play with our group, because it's the one I enjoy most. I think it's pretty insane when it gets to go off.
This is a great list that can be touched upon every new set that comes out. It's really looking for more and more cards to make it great. More than ever, it needs new cards. And
Double strike. Please.
All the wheels.
So gang, hang tight for future episodes on Neheb. We're definitely going to discuss this deck in depth, how to make it better moving forward, and obviously when new cards from new sets come out, we'll work on building the best Neheb we can, but so far I think this is where it's at. Yeah.
I mean, it's gotta showcase on Brew Wars. We have to try with Neheb, and we're gonna have fun with Neheb. Will we win with Neheb?
We'll find out. So guys, hang tight for another future episode of Brew Wars. We're always working on our schedules, trying to get together. Of course, if we can't get that out, do expect weekly content from us regardless. But until next time, again, my name is Patrick Marlatt.
And I'm Justin. Happy brewing.
Happy brewing, babies.